I'm just going to take a little bit of a different lens, a higher level, not into the nitty gritty as much, and happy to answer questions that are more detailed, but we're just going to stay at a higher level from the Planning District Commission's point of view as opposed to a specific locality. So without further ado, resilience and mitigation planning here on the Eastern Shore. I'm going to go over a little bit about collaboration with our localities and our other partners in the region that are integral to resilience and mitigation planning. A few examples of localities and here on the shore that have integrated resilience into their comprehensive plans fairly well, as well as their general policies, and some lessons learned and challenges we faced. So really, we have later on today's agenda, we have Kurt Smith, who was with the ANPDC for a decade and really helped pave the way for the advanced conversations and the language that is now in our comprehensive plans for our localities. And what has been most important are really the partnerships in our rural region to make sure that everybody is speaking the same language. Locally specific data, locally specific actions that have been identified with multiple trusted voices speaking the same truth. And that really started before the Climate Adaptation Working Group was formed officially, but that work's been underway for a decade, and it's not just been localities that have been involved. It's our partners with NASA, partners with NOAA, Coastal Zone Management, the airport, anybody and everybody that we can think of that has a stake in the game, which is pretty much anybody who operates a business, an organization, has a federal installation here on the shore. And other than local data and having a data-driven process, having timely and consistent community engagement. So at least every 6 months, having an opportunity for the general public and all of our localities to come together and hear what's underway and to speak their voice and express their needs. So it was back in 2007 that the ANPDC's Coastal Management Committee started moving this trend towards the Climate Adaptation Working Group. And a lot of the effort that's been done since that time has been done under the auspice of this regional collaborative organization that has over 30 partnering agencies in and out, depending on the projects that we're working on. A few examples of some of the partners. I failed to mention some of our state agencies as well as our universities, including William and Mary, and our partners with Elizabeth and her team, and the VIMS campus at Gloucester, and here on the Eastern Shore at the Waterprig Eastern Shore Lab. So one of the big first projects that I came into at the tail end of in 2015-16 was this huge NIFWIF funded project to get really specific data for the Eastern Shore. So when you're trying to have conversations locally about trends in climate change and sea level rise, even if those words aren't yet acceptable, having data that's very specific to the location that you're working is important. If you bring data that's from a worldwide statistic or even a state or national statistic and modeling, there's a tendency for folks to say, well, that might not be accurate for here, and they're right. The trends are very specific regionally, and so having a tool, the Coastal Resilience Tool, to help communicate the science and very specific science for the Eastern Shore was vital to making everyone see the trends and trust the data. And that tool is still being enhanced and updated by the Nature Conservancy, managed by the Nature Conservancy, but there was intense training events that were well attended over the years, and helping not only local land use planners and local elected officials, but residents and businesses able to use this tool to think about future expansion, overlay districts for future land use planning, and it's been really important. So encourage local data. So over the the years, we've had all sorts of data collected, all of these trainings and partnerships, and now moving forward, what we're able to do is integrate our hazard mitigation plan strategies and actions and all of the resilience projects that have been identified by the COG partners, the Climate Adaptation Working Group partners over the years, into a robust database of projects. And that's presented to our stakeholder group, the COG folks, for prioritization, using some of the same fields that the state has identified in their database in work towards the Coastal Resilience Master Plan for the coastal region. And we've put together something like 120 projects for the region that are still in the final stages of prioritization. And that's going to be a living database, something that the COG partners and the localities can access regularly. They can update, make updates as they make progress on their resilience projects and their mitigation projects. And you'll see a lot of overlap between our hazard mitigation plan and our resilience projects database, as you should. They're not identical. Not all projects in the hazard mitigation plan align with the structural and programmatic changes that are identified in the project types for the state master plan, but a lot of overlap. All right. So this is just an excerpt of the database that we're putting together, showing the project types that align with the state project types and brief descriptions, the localities. Important to have a project lead identified, the location, cost estimates, and where we are with the progress, if it's planning, engineering, and the like. A few examples now, moving away from that big picture regional planning and helping to make sure that all of the localities and unincorporated areas in the region are represented and have projects identified to help them moving forward. I've got examples from Accomack County, the town of Chincoteague, and Northampton County, which are the 3 members of the ANPDC. The Accomack County comp plan, it does include coastal resilience, as you must, as mandated by state code. But they did go above and beyond in some ways. So there wasn't a lot of appetite for regulatory push down on forcing resilience planning for residents. But they did move in the direction of identifying V zones, A zones, all of the 100-year storms, and all of the 5 goals and strategies in the hazard mitigation plan are all integrated into their comprehensive plan. So they don't just say, you know, here's the 2016 hazard mitigation plan. It has some projects identified for Accomack County. It integrates it in. It has a lot of the same language and ties the goals and strategies for the county in with the hazard mitigation plan goals and strategies that were developed. And when I say they went a little further outside of the comp plan, they also are moving forward with coastal advisory statements. So they've got the Planning Commission working each year on a different advisory document. They just completed an advisory document for those looking to purchase and build and new property owners. And currently they're working on guidance for existing development to be more prepared for sea level rise, climate change, and to be more resilient in advance. And also for torrential rain events is going to be what they work on next year, which is really good timing since the state is getting their precipitation modeling data all up to date. So by the time the county is developing their guidance for torrential rain events, they'll have that the newest data to guide the process. So I can't imagine, honestly, when I first started with the Planning District Commission, which was only 5 years ago, the county coming out with a 6-page document that guides residents and investors to use the NOAA Sea Level Rise Viewer. While they might not actually say sea level rise in the 6-page guidance, they call it water level rise and high tide flooding for the county. It still leads you to a tool, the Sea Level Rise Viewer. And this is the tool that they use in developing the 6-page guidance. So they also reference that coastal resilience tool, and they pull and extract data and guidance from that document or that tool, but this is the tool that they use to focus and where they've guided everyone. And it's pretty substantial. So now whenever somebody is coming to get a building permit for a new structure in the county, they are given this guidance, and it's made readily available on the county's website, as is all of the special flood hazard area and different zoning that guides people away from the most sensitive and at-risk areas of the county. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they come up with for existing development and providing technical assistance as needed from the Planning District Commission. And that's really what COG was designed to do, and what the county requested of the Climate Adaptation Working Group was to help guide them to the scientific resources that are most appropriate for the Eastern Shore to help them in developing these guidelines. This advisory information is advisory right now, but it's paving the way for, in the future, what might come to a regulatory code change at the county level. The town of Chincoteague is in the process currently of updating everything, and I have to say there that beyond the comp plan, generally residents aren't perusing the comp plan and having that on their nightstand as their evening reading, but they do use their localities' websites all the time. And so rather than just praising these localities for having information about resiliency and mitigation in their comprehensive plans, it's important to note that these localities also have it throughout their website and easily found on their website. So this is an example. It's the landing page for the town of Chincoteague. If you hover over citizens, one of the drop downs is flood maps. And when you go to that, you'll see the floodplain ordinances, definitions of freeboard. You'll see the FEMA flood maps, the FIRM, the flood insurance rate maps, links to floodsmart.gov, the FEMA insurance study. So just really front and foremost, making it easy for residents to find what they need to see where their property lies in the floodplain and their risk level. Here we go. Sorry about that. All right, and their comprehensive plan, they just had their public hearing and updated it last February, just before the pandemic. So that was good timing. And they incorporated resiliency throughout. So I heard Brian say, it shouldn't just be a buzzword, and it shouldn't. But when the word resiliency is found in your comprehensive plan over 60 times, it's not just a buzzword. It means that you're integrating resiliency not only into its standalone page that its standalone pages that specifically talk about resiliency considerations. It's also integrated into their general land use planning section, their coastal resource management subsection, their economic development, tourism, recreation. It's throughout the entire plan, in the narrative as well as in the actionable items that they would like to implement over the next 5 years. So while I think it's important that they define resiliency, that they have a section wholly dedicated to resiliency, having it over 60 times throughout the document and in every single element of the plan, acknowledging the weaknesses, the strengths, recommendations for the future to reduce risk. It's really amazing to see them have that throughout the document. And I think that this has a good example for localities that might be looking to update their comp plan as to how they might be able to do so in a really robust way throughout the entire comprehensive plan. Let's see. The last locality I'll touch on is Northampton County. Anybody that's from the shore knows Northampton has been, taking a long approach to updating their comprehensive plan. They've had some turnover and they've had a lot of changes, and it's been a long road, but they are scheduled to have their public hearing May 4th to adopt their new comprehensive plan, and did go with an outside firm instead of doing it in-house. And I think that's helped them to look at things through different lenses and incorporate guidance beyond, what's locally accepted here on the shore. Again, pointing out that Northampton County's website has a really nice, easily navigable site and lots of information available about their FEMA determination, the flood insurance rate maps again. So while it's great to see it in the comp plan, important for long-term planning, for the day-to-day use, and encouraging residents to think about the think about where they're going to be building, where they're going to be moving, where they might be investing, to think about resiliency of the property and where they would like to do so on the day-to-day. It's important to have all of this front and foremost on their website and accessible. Let's see. I will note that, I think all three of these comprehensive plans not only reference the hazard mitigation plan, the 2016 hazard mitigation plan, but they also reference the RAFT. So that's been really important here on the shore, and they've pulled the high priority goals that were established during the RAFT planning process and put those into their comprehensive plans. And many of them also link to the RAFT website on their locality website. This new comp plan that hopefully gets adopted here next month has a lot more information about resiliency than the previous iteration of the plan from over a decade ago, as you can imagine. And I will note that unlike some of the other localities, they didn't shy away from the word climate change resiliency by using some, alternative language for climate change. They have climate change resiliency directly in their planning objectives. Rolling it through, this is just an excerpt, but if you roll through the whole document, it's through every potential zoning element where climate change resiliency should be planned for. And then there's a whole suite of actions and priorities related to resiliency throughout every element of the plan. They also mentioned living shorelines, I think a dozen times or so in the plan, which is monumental and wasn't referenced a single time in the previous iteration of the plan. Let's see. All right, so I'm happy to answer more questions, but I'm going to wrap this up quickly. Kurt, you'll recognize this. Prior to my days, lessons learned and challenges faced. I think having patience is extremely important. I know we now are hearing the drums beating very loudly that action is now, but I think that the patience that other folks before me had with our localities and working with them at their own pace and using their own language was really important to establish trust and get folks to have buy-in. Not only did we get that massive investment from NIFWIF to get local data to drive our planning processes, we also had something called the Coastal Change Archive that was initiated before my time, but it allowed the local folks that have been here and had their family here for generations to share their stories. So without using climate change language or sea level rise language, a decade ago, just have them interview them and talk to them about the way that their croplands have changed. Their family's been here for over 100 years, a centennial farm. What have you seen over time? Where you go hunting, where you go fishing, where you go recreationally boating, where your homestead is, where you were raised. What changes have you seen? And documenting those stories from folks that were born in the early 1900s that have literally watched the land and the marsh around them change over their lifetime. These are a few examples that I have shared, but there's a whole lot more of these stories, and having folks come to their own conclusions and speaking to one another and recognizing that, I think was really important to establishing trust and a recognition. Folks are much more inclined to think about something and believe something if they process the information and come to that conclusion themselves instead of somebody forcing it down their throat or just telling them this is happening. So that's really important. Also having, Brian said local leadership, and he used a great example, but even locally here, we had early in the game, Mayor Leonard from the town of Chincoteague, who, even though other folks on the town council and even staff might not have been willing to discuss climate change and sea level rise, he was an early advocate of addressing these issues, acknowledging them and planning for them, and still is. So him, one of the, a couple of board of supervisors, one from each county I can think of specifically, that without their loud voices and their support, we might not have gotten to where we are today with resilience planning on the shore. And then another success as TIVA, which was Kurt's brainchild when he was the director of planning here, but the Transportation Infrastructure Inundation Vulnerability Assessment, thanks for the name, Kurt, you know, picking a topic that is vital for everybody, that doesn't make it an insurmountable, like this is something that just you have to work on the town of Chincoteague, or just you have to work on the town of Anancock. Here's an issue that's important for everybody, transportation. We all need to get to and fro, and putting into perspective from a specific topic that affects everybody, but that you can talk to a government agency about, VDOT, and you know, shake your fist and say, it's not just me, it's the state that needs to help us with this, and it gets everybody kind of on the same team, working towards the same goal. All right, I think that's it for me.